Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today I wanted to talk about a book that I just finished reading and I really enjoyed it, and that is Little Monsters by Kara Thompson. This book is so good. It's like a young adult version of a Stephen King novel, and I'm going to talk about a little bit about like the darker sides to it, the psychology of it a little bit, and there's going to be lots of spoilers, so if you haven't read it yet, and I highly recommend that you do, don't watch this review yet, go read the book and then come back. Alright, so presumably everyone has gone who has not read the book yet, so we can talk about all kinds of spoilers with this. So basically what this book is about, it's these three girls, Jade, Bailey, and Casey, who are best friends, and they all go to the same high school, and Casey is the new kid though, and they just recently took her into their little clique, and Bailey goes missing. And the police's investigation takes them to like Casey, they take him to Jade, they take him to even like Casey's brother Andrew, and it's this intense like roller coaster of who did it, like who kidnapped Bailey, who killed Bailey, what's happening. So just the premise, when I got this book, I thought it was gonna be kind of interesting because yes, I'm that person who watched all the seasons of Pretty Little Liars, and I was like, oh, it sounds kind of like that. Now, for the record though, I watched Pretty Little Liars a few years back, and I thought it was decent, like as a show and whatever, and I thought it was intriguing, but like now the more that I think about it, the less I like it. But this book, I think, did what Pretty Little Liars wanted to do, and that is create kind of a creepy atmosphere that's relatable to kids in high school, and just give a fun story, a fun like who did it kind of mystery. But where Pretty Little Liars kind of screwed up is that it tried too hard to be like this drama, when this book just tried to capture, it didn't even try to capture the spirit of anything, it was being something. And that's what I think is so cool, that I wasn't trying to be like, oh, look how relatable it is for kids in high school, look how relatable it is, look how relatable. Like, the people who try to make things relatable tend to make things that just aren't relatable. And that's what I think the problem was with Pretty Little Liars, is that that show just tried so hard to be relatable, as in like, look at these kids in high school doing high school kinds of things and parties and prom and this and that and whatever. But it kind of lost in that trying to be so relatable, it lost its relatability, because not every kid goes to so many different parties and not every person has connections with everyone in town. And that's just what was crazy about that story, is that like Allison, the girl who goes missing in Pretty Little Liars, had like connections with everyone in town. This book, however, Bailey, the girl who goes missing, she has connections with people, but people who are, it's realistic that she would be connected to, like friends her own age, people in her same grade and whatnot. So it made sense that she would know these people, that she would be connected with them, that she would have this, knowledge about them. However, there is some stuff that I think tried to dive a little bit too much into the psyche of a psychopath, and I enjoyed that aspect of it, but I also wonder like the author's credentials about this, and I don't like being that person of like, well, who are you to write this story? But sometimes it's touchy for me, because I do study a lot of psychology, and I do get kind of nervous when I read a story about someone who's trying to like dip into this darker realm of mental health and whatnot. And I don't mean that mental health is darker, but I just mean the darker aspects of mental health. So like being a psychopath or a sociopath. And now for the record, because I know some people are going to get upset, not all psychopaths and not all sociopaths are dangerous. In fact, a very small percentage of them are dangerous. So it's a very huge stereotype, it's a very huge stigma that's kind of dangerous to a lot of people, to say that all psychopaths or all sociopaths are dangerous or they're scary or whatever, when that's just realistically not the case at all. However, I was nervous going into this book because I knew that she was going to try, like on the back of the book, it says it's a wild psychological thriller, and that both drew me in and made me nervous, because I love the psychology books, and I like books that dabble with that a lot, but this is where I'm nervous about it. They have to be done correctly, and they have to be done well, and the person has to like know what they're talking about. And I was very nervous about that, but this book actually did it quite well. If now again, you have to remember though, not everyone who's ooh, dear Lord, let's fix that really fast. Not everyone who's a psychopath is dangerous. Not everyone who's a sociopath is dangerous. And now, like I said, there's going to be spoilers, so let's dive into that. So Jade is really the villain of the story. She really is, from my perspective. She seems to have some serious, well, some people are like, oh, she's a sociopath, she's a psychopath, like in the story. But to me, she really doesn't seem to have that kind of aspect to her. Like, yeah, she's willing to like kill people, and now she's willing to even kill her best friend. And she's like willing to like lie about like where her mom is and there's all this stuff, and she's manipulative of people and whatnot. But the thing that makes it different for me versus like a psychopath or a sociopath versus something else is that she does have feelings, she does have emotions. She feels angry, she feels jealous, she feels like possessive of Bailey. You know, she's best friends with Bailey, and then in comes this new girl, and she's like, well, who is this new girl? You know, now now Bailey's obsessed with Casey, and Jade is feeling like left out or whatever. And so when Bailey doesn't kill, what's her name, Casey, then Jade is like, well, okay, then I'll just kill you instead. If I can't have you, then no one can. That kind of mentality. And to me, that doesn't scream sociopath. It doesn't even scream psychopath, because you have to remember, a sociopath or a psychopath, they don't feel things. They want to use you, like, absolutely. Well, not all the time, but like when they're pretending like they feel something for you, sometimes, like, yeah, they are pretending, but they're pretending just so they can have like a somewhat normal life, not because they want to actually hurt you or whatever. And some people might see that as using you, but it's not. It's just them trying to figure out how to cope with them not being able to feel anything, so they pretend. So yeah, I think Jade is definitely pretending some stuff. Like, she lies about where her mom is. She says her mom has been dead for years, but her mom was totally fine, just like left the father. And everyone was like kind of confused about that. Or she manipulates Lauren, Casey's little sister. Like, she manipulates her so much and like convinces her that she's gonna murder everyone if she tells anyone. This kid, I mean, not Lauren, but Jade. This girl has some serious problems, but I don't think it's sociopathic, and I don't think it's like psychopathic, psychotic. Maybe. I think there's some other issues going on, but at some points I almost thought God complex, but then I was like, no, I don't think it's. I think there may be some dabbles in that, but I don't think that's what was intended. So moving on from that, though, I do think the mental health aspect was handled quite well, because Andrew, Casey's older brother, he's her older stepbrother. He is suffering with depression, and I think it's handled in a good way. Like, they don't treat him like he's, you know, like this person who needs to be handled delicately. You know, he's able to have a normal life, or relatively normal life. He's smart, motivated, but then he does have those spells, and he's on medication, and there's no shame about him being on medication, which I was very, appreciative of, because I feel like a lot of kids don't get the support they need when it comes to medication and whatnot, especially with mental health. So I was very happy about that. But also, the thing that kind of triggered his depression, I thought was pretty good. It was just him breaking up with his girlfriend, and most people were like, well, why do you think that's a good thing or whatever, or a good way to represent depression? Because a lot of people depressed over really serious things, and here's why I think it's good to show depression over little things too. Is that depression? Let's see, how can I word this so it doesn't sound weird? People in everyday life don't usually have huge traumatic events happen to them. They have very normal things happen. And so to say that you can only be depressed if you have something incredibly traumatic happen to you is so naive and so ignorant. Because some people are depressed and they have everything great going for them. They have a great job, a great, spouse, or, significant other, they have kids, they've got, a lot of money, whatever it may be, but they can still be depressed, because depression isn't just like an outside force. Sometimes it is genetic, sometimes it is, chronic, clinical. Like, there's other issues, and there's also other layers of depression, and it's not just like, hey, you were assaulted, now you're depressed, or you lost your job and now you're depressed. It's like normal things can happen and trigger that. And I think this book will, I think can definitely trigger a conversation between parents and their children. If like a parent were to read this and say, oh, well, he was depressed because his girlfriend broke up with him, and it's like a serious depression. It wasn't just like him feeling sad or sorry for himself. Like that's what triggered the depression, but it was like always kind of there. And parents could ask their kids like, hey, has anything like that happened? Or like, you don't have to just broken up with a girlfriend, but like maybe, you know, broken up with just a friend, or like something horrible's happened, or maybe you got bad grades. Like who knows what could trigger your depression, but like anything could. It could just be like lying in wait under the surface, and then something kind of minor happens, and that's what triggers it. So I do like how they show that you don't have to go through some horrible, horrible thing in order to be depressed, and in order for that depression to be legitimate and to be noteworthy and concern worthy, and that you can ask for help about that, and there's no shame about that. That was important to me. I thought it was very well handled, and I appreciated that a lot in this book. So all of that being covered, I also want to talk a little bit about the characters too. So Casey I thought was very well written. I thought it was her story was very compelling, her backstory, and the fact that she doesn't get along with her mom and she takes some of the blame on herself. I think that's very realistic of a lot of kids, especially like abused kids, is that when they don't get along with their parents, like they want to, like kids naturally want to get along with their parents, and when they don't, somehow they always take the blame, or a lot of times they take the blame. And I think that's really sad, because most of the time it's not their problem and it's not something that they even have control over. But they still take that on, and it still can affect their behavior and their moods and things like that too. So I thought it was good to show that she wanted to have a good relationship with her mom, and it even showed that the mom was like a decent person. Like she wasn't just like not caring about her kid. It's like she was addicted to all those boyfriends. She was addicted to drinking, and I don't remember if they said that she used drugs or not. I think she did, but I'm not 100% sure. And it showed the longing to belong, you know, in teenagers, and that stress that comes with moving to a new place in a very realistic light, with Casey being the new kid, and she meets this new girl, Bailey, and she's like, oh my gosh, you know, this kid likes me, I want to be liked by her. And that dependency that you have on that person, and how hurt you are when that person suddenly drops you. It even shows the other side of the coin for Bailey when she's talking about her friend Val, who dropped her to join the dance team or whatever, and Bailey was hurt by that, and it just shows how, like, you know, people treat others how they've been treated at the end of the day. If you've been abused your whole life, chances are you might abuse others, even not like knowing to or willing to or wanting to. You might hurt other people just because that's how you've been taught to behave. Bailey was dropped by her friend, so what does she do to Casey? She drops her too. Jade, however, was manipulating and, you know, controlling the whole situation, which is kind of scary if you think about it, because of how much control she had over everyone in her little party. So, but here's the difference between Pretty Little Liars and Jade, like Jade versus Allison kind of a thing. Allison had connections and controlled everybody in town, like everyone, like the cops, like her friends' parents, and just all this craziness. And to me, that's so unrealistic. Like, you're gonna tell me that like a 15-year-old kid is able to blackmail like tons of adults? Like, that's just crazy. However, in this book, Jade, she is it's almost scarier than Allison because of how she's able to manipulate people and the people that she's able to manipulate. Because while Allison was manipulating everyone, it was so unrealistic that you could never see it happening, while Jade was only manipulating people who she could potentially actually be, you know, connected with and manipulate and control. And that's what I think made Jade scarier, is because it was more realistic. And that's what Stephen King gets really right, I think, a lot in his books, is that while the scenario, like the scary scenario, isn't really realistic, like clowns and things like that, and killer lawnmowers and whatnot, like that's not really realistic, but the people, the characters, the world he sets up is so real and something that we see on like a daily basis. And that's the same thing that's in this book, that we can almost put ourselves into this crazy scenario and say, hey, I can totally see this happening to me. And that's ultimately, at the end of the day, what makes things so scary, is that we can see ourselves doing those same decisions and, like, you know, taking those same paths and winding up at that same conclusion, which is a horrifying one. And that's what I think got this book. I think that's why this book really did it for me, because it set up these characters in a realistic light, in like a realistic high school scenario, and a realistic, you know, area, and people reacting realistically. And then it said, okay, here's a horrifying situation. This person goes missing, and then there's blood found here, and there's blood found here, and then this person's acting this crazy way, and then this thing is happening. But it all just makes sense, because it might actually happen that way. There's such a plausible, you know, or such a potential that could happen, and that's what makes it so horrifying, is because you can see that happening in your own life. And that's what personally kind of scared me a little bit about it. And I don't scare easily. I'm not like, oh my gosh. It didn't like keep me up at night or anything like that, but it did kind of creep me out. Sent a couple of goosebumps up my arms, because you're sitting here reading about these teenagers doing normal teenage stuff, and because of that, horrible things happen, which then makes you wonder, how many inconsequential things have I done that I think are so stupid and like would never result in anything horrible? Like, how many of those things could have resulted in something horrible, or maybe have resulted in something horrible that I just don't know about? And I think it's those unknowns that just make things so creepy. So basically, to sum up, because I don't want this video and this review to go on for too long, I loved this book. I read it so fast, and now I want to reread it because I think there's so much in it that I probably missed. And I'm not huge into like young adult, teenage, you know, high school stuff, even though, like I said, I did watch all 7 seasons of Pretty Little Liars. I will say, though, I took a long break in between like season 3 and season 4 because I needed a break from that drama. But the normal stuff that I watch or read is not this. So I actually surprised myself that I bought this book, and I was like, oh, I like the title. I don't know, Little Monsters. It's so clean and simple and just boom. And something about the title just kind of drew me in, and I read the back of the book, and it talked about, you know, psychological thrillers and this and that, whatever, and that kind of piqued my interest a little bit. And I didn't actually realize it was about like high school kids until like I started reading the book. So after I bought it, and then I was like, oh, well, I'm not really gonna like this. And I even Snapchatted one of my friends, and I'm like, I'm probably not gonna like this, but you know, whatever. And then I ended up really liking the book. So if you don't like high school stories, give it a try anyway, because it really isn't like high school based. Like, there's some high school stuff and there's some high school drama, but the majority of it is focusing on the 3 girls, and primarily Casey though, and the psychology and their mental health and what's going on with all of that, and just some really good, scary, creepy stuff that almost borders on supernatural but still remains in the realm of probability, that just makes things so creepy. So I would definitely recommend this book. I think I gave it like a 5-star rating on Goodreads, I think. 4 or 5. I don't usually give books 5-star ratings, so I feel like it was definitely a 4-star. I gave it a 4-star rating. I don't usually give books 5 stars just because I think you have to be really, really good in order to be 5 stars. But this book was definitely a solid 4 stars. So definitely check it out if you haven't. And I'll catch you guys in the next video. Alright, bye.